Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about the conclusion to the World Championships, as well as what the meta may look like going forward. And this is actually the more important part of the video because we are going to be in this format for a while. While we are in the off season now that Worlds has concluded, you guys got to keep in mind that the competitive season, including regionals, is starting up in February. But we're going to be in set 15, at least in the US. I'm not sure if it's like this for every region. We're going to be in set 15 format at least through February because set 16 has been delayed to March. So that in mind, it's important to talk about this stuff. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and let's just jump right into it. Alright, so here we have it. Your World Championship deck is Mono Yellow Icarus. Shout out to Andrew Duvall, shout out to USA. I'm obviously very happy because I'm from that region. Very happy to see USA take home the first World Championship, as well as Icarus, man. I've been through so much with this leader. It's been such a fun ride. It's honestly one of the most fun decks I've ever played in Dragon Ball Super, and the fact that it was able to transition to Mono Yellow after taking such crazy blue-yellow hits to the core version of the deck is such an insane thing. Honestly, if you asked me before Nationals, I could have strongly seen Soul Striker sitting in this same spot using the blue-yellow package. I really wouldn't have been able to predict that Mono Yellow Icarus would have went all the way, but that just goes to show you how good of a deck it is. Also goes to show you how good of a player Andrew is. So again, I do want to send a huge shout out to Andrew for taking home the World Championship. Such an insane thing that we finally have a world champion after the year of COVID kind of just passing by, nothing happening. The year before that in Nationals, they announced that Worlds was something kind of in the process behind the scenes. So that was really cool. And I have said it before in previous videos, but I do want to again shout out all the guys from Stage Zero, Melvin, any of you guys that worked on the World stream and the Worlds behind the scenes stuff. Huge shout out to you guys, because making the best out of a weird situation with COVID, you guys did a really phenomenal job. So I do again want to shout all those guys out. They've also taken the time to gather all the deck lists and put them in a Google Doc, so I'm going to be linking that down in the description below. Again, I want to make sure I give the proper shout outs for that material, which comes from those guys, I believe from Eggman, but also from the Stage Zero guys in general. So with that being said, let's move on a little bit. All right, so I think we have a very safe bet to say that this is the triangle meta of the format, but I don't say triangle to exclude any other decks from being meta relevant. We'll talk about that more later, but still, regardless of that, I think these are the three best decks in the format, and they kind of go in this ebb and flow. And I'm gonna say this, but this is not a hard rule. But anyways, it seems like Icarus has a rough time against Cell Surge. Cell Surge has a rough time against Gogeta Xeno, and Gogeta Xeno has a rough time against Icarus. Now again, that is not a hard rule. We saw Icarus lose to Gogeta Xeno at Worlds, and I certainly think Icarus has a fine shot of beating Cell Surge in any given match. I think a lot of that is way more dependent on Pilot than it actually is on a matchup by matchup basis. But just due to like the tools the decks have, as well as like the strategies they go for, I think that's the general matchup percentage. So when I say this loses to this and that loses to that, I would put it more in the realm of like maybe a 60-40 matchup in terms of percentages, maybe even a 55-45%. Really not that crazy of a skew, as where like you might have like some 90-10 matchup where you can't ever win. That's not what we're talking about here. This is way winnable for all these decks, and to me, that's a super healthy meta, right? Like, these decks are all relatively fair, I would say, except for Cell Surge and maybe Gogeta Xeno. But let's be honest, guys, of the aggro decks of the past, Gogeta Xeno is not that crazy. You're actually spending energy for most of your battle cards. You do put out a lot of battle cards for very cheap, but again, you do actually spend energy for battle cards. Icarus has only gotten fairer, most likely because of the fact that it's gone from blue yellow now to mono yellow. It's got a very stringent amount of energy it can play with every single turn. You can pretty much count that as the opponent. You can pretty much account for most things that Icarus can do, and the few free things they can do, like power of a Super Saiyan or freeze armor reinforcements, you can also account for that without having to really expect them to explode on their energy, right? I think that Cell Surge could be considered the most unfair deck, because honestly, like, there are some matchups where Cell Surge does kind of auto win, and a lot of people would say Blue and Soul Striker, as another example, would be one of those matchups that Cell Surge auto wins. So I do think it's fair to say that Cell Surge is the most unfair deck in the format. But as far as these three decks being top dog, I think it's a pretty good representation of the format and how it kind of ebbs and flows. But again, there are several other decks that are still very good, that manage top other national events that you should consider. And I will also be linking Top Deck Diffusion down in the description. I posted their link a few times now, but they basically have all the, I believe it's the top 2 or top 3 decks from all the different regions and their nationals. So make sure to check that out to see all the different decks that have topped all the different nationals. We did a video talking about that last week, but anyways, check the link in the description if you want to see that again. But anyways, moving on. Like I said, I definitely don't think those are the only 3 playable decks in the format. I don't think anyone really thinks that. I think Soul Striker is still very good. I think Sin Shenron's still very good. Hatchiyak even managed to win a Nationals, so I expect some people to be playing that, although not a crazy amount of people. I think when it comes to a deck like Hatchiyak, playstyle is a big thing, and it takes a very specific player to want to play a very slow, meticulous deck like Hatchiyak. So I don't think a ton of people will play it, but I do think, you know, it'll see play because it managed to win one of the national events. Launch even came second place in one of the events, so I expect to see a decent amount of popularity. But Sin and Soul Striker, in my opinion, they're the closest thing to, you know, if there was a top 5 meta decks. I'm not really willing to say that these would be in the top 5 with Cell Surge, Gogeta, Xeno, and Icarus, but I am willing to say that there's a conversation that can be had there, right? I think that these will be the next decks to kind of push that envelope, so to speak. But again, like, the power level from, like, let's just say the top 3 to these to Rogue, it's not really that wide of a gap. So even though I'm using these different descriptors to say, like, these are the top 3, these are maybe the next 2, and then you have all your other Rogue decks more so towards the bottom, I'm not trying to say that there's no competition in between those decks, if that makes sense, guys. So I want to kind of get that message across. And basically what I mean by that is, I think Rogue is going to be just as popular as ever. The fact that Android 16 managed to go to second place at US Nationals, the fact that Green Broly starter deck managed to go to top 4 of Worlds, I think King Piccolo even came second place at one of the different nationals, and it also topped American Nats. So, like, there have just been all these crazy Rogue decks that managed to do insane things in this playoff season, which was crazy. Half of American Nationals was basically Rogue decks that people didn't expect in the top 16. So it's honestly a really, really crazy thing. One thing I do got to say, though, shout out to you, Wang Po, because you are absolutely goated for playing commemorative photo in your deck. I just tuned into one of the games the other day and saw that card in his energy, and I was absolutely mind blown. I was like, okay, this guy is basically a legend. First of all, taking a super Rogue deck to the event. Some would argue like Cell Surge, but worse, but I'm sure Broly has its different matchups where it actually excels because it can actually pivot into a bit more of an aggro deck than Cell Surge can. But yeah, the fact that you took this like super sleeper deck and the fact that your remaining commemorative photo was absolutely wild. And of course, shout out to Jared for second placing at US Nationals with Android 16. No one in a million years would have ever expected that. But again, you can say that same thing for top 8 Android 21, for top 8 Red King Piccolo. All these different things are just absolutely mind-boggling. So I definitely expect a lot of Rogue to be popular, even though I think there is a clear top 3 in the meta. So other Rogue decks to expect, I think a lot of Red is probably fair game. Again, King Piccolo bringing Red back to the map. You also have your Red Jiren, which I think is a very, very good deck. You've got your different U7 decks like U7 Vegeta, and you got U7 Gohan as well. Android 21 may have even brought like SS4 Vegeta ramp back, or maybe even like Android 18 Mill, just people wanting to experiment with those ramp slash clone token strategies. So I really do think Rogue is going to be just as popular as ever. Like, Rogue has been very popular in Dragon Ball Super for most of the game's history, except for those rare times we've had like tier 0 or like really defined triangle formats where Rogue decks couldn't really compete. There have been a handful of formats like that, don't get me wrong, but most of the Unison Warrior block has been this very open, like, yes, there are very, very good decks, but Rogue is also really good. And usually Rogue players are very heavily rewarded for sticking to a particular deck and mastering it, mastering its matchups, mastering the ratios, being absolutely sure of how they want to sideboard. Lots of Rogue players in this game have been heavily, heavily rewarded for that. So if you're someone who doesn't really like the top 3, you don't love Icarus, you don't love Cell Surge, you don't love Gogeta Xeno, pick up a Rogue deck that does something unique and powerful and just master the crap out of it. I think it actually will be very, very rewarding. We've seen stuff like that with Invoker, for example, right? Invoker's certainly fallen from grace, but there are just players that play it non-stop. They know every single matchup. They've adapted different ways to win now that the main win con, Catastrophic Blow, has been hit on the ban list. So with that in mind, I really do want to implore you, if you want to play Rogue in this meta, or even like one of the mid-tier decks like Soul Striker, Sin, Hatchiyak, Launch, just take the time to master it, and I think you will find good success in this meta. But yes, we're going to be going through this all the way through March, and I believe the first regionals for next season start up in February, mid or early February. So with that in mind, we're going to be in this format once again, going through that time period. So it's going to be crazy. This is going to be a very, very long format. Usually formats tend to last like 3-ish months. This is going more on like 4 or 5 months, which is again kind of wild. But anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Of course, I want to know what you guys think in the comments below about where the meta is going. What decks you guys think will pop up over the course of the next couple months? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.